Jabari, got to get it in. Does to Smith. Jabari for three and the win. Yeah! He got it!
We are here to Field Rocks News. It's the Rocksfield Podcast. I'm your host, LaShawn Binkley. I'm a credential reporter covering the Houston Rockets and Rio Grande Valley Vipers. You can find my written work over at Rockets on SI, which is part of Sports Illustrated. Or you can find me over on Twitter X at Binkley Hoops. And as you can tell, I'm in my car, so that must mean some breaking news just came out not too long ago. We heard that Fred VanVleet will be back in the lineup for the first time since the beginning of February. He's coming back after a injured ankle. And we also kind of got a more definite answer on the starting lineup going forward, at least for now. Found out that Jabari Smith will be coming off the bench. And of course, Amen Thompson will continue to start along with Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, and alperensengun. And on today's show, I want to kind of give my opinion on why that happened, why Ime made the decision, and why ultimately it may be the best thing for everybody involved, at least for the time being as far as the starting line. So let's first start off with why it was a good idea for Ime to have Jabari coming off the bench. If you look at it, I know a lot of people may not be the biggest fans of Dillon Brooks, but if you really look at Dillon Brooks objectively, you look at his numbers, he's having I just wrote an article about this. He's having quietly one of the best seasons of his career. He's shooting a career high from 3-point range at 39%. He's averaging 4 rebounds a game, which is also a career high. He may not be the lockdown defender he once was, but he is still one of the better, more versatile defenders in the NBA. One point he could be playing Karl Anthony Towns one night. The next night he'll be playing Kyrie Irving. So that's somebody you definitely still need to start line, even with Amen fast becoming the Rockets' best defensive player overall. You can never have too many good defensive players in starting lineup. And on top of that, more importantly, is the shooting. The Rockets struggle from 3-point range. They need all the shooting they can get. Not that Jabari is a slouch, but when you have a player that's shooting 40% from 3-point range since the beginning of the year, and Dillon Brooks, you definitely want to keep him in the starting lineup on a team that still struggles from beyond the arc. And also, when you look at Jabari come off the bench, he's a more versatile player coming off the bench. You have him as, of course, a power forward, but you can also have him as a stretch five, something that Ime has played around with ever since he came to the Rockets last season. Now, I think you're going to see that even more now with Jabari coming off the bench. Not to say that Steven Adams is not going to play, but Ime is really comfortable having Jabari after 5 because Ime likes to switch all pick and roll actions, and he believes he can do that better with a player like Jabari Smith. And also, Jabari's help defense definitely comes in handy when he's playing that backup center position. So it kind of gives him a lot more option coming off the bench. And I think that Jabari also fits better with the bench unit than Dillon does. Dillon is somebody that can occasionally get his own shot, but he needs facilitators. He needs players like Fred VanVleet, and he needs players like Jalen Green and alperensengun who are going to get double teamed so that he can get those open shots. Something he may not necessarily get if he's playing with, players like Aaron Holiday or Tari Eason or Cam Whitmore at times. He's not necessarily going to get those open shots. So I think he fits better with the starting lineup. And like I said, Jabari's versatility coming off the bench, I think plays a factor in that. And that's something actually I may ask Ime tomorrow is his versatility coming off the bench, is that something that kind of factor into you making a decision as far as putting Jabari to the bench? And we kind of saw them play around with it since Jabari has come back. He's kind of gone back and forth between the bench and starting, depending on whether Tari Eason was healthy or not. So we kind of saw that coming. And like I said earlier on X, I'm not really surprised, just because of another topic I want to go into is why it's no surprise that Ime made his decision. That's something I've said from day one, ever since Amen's kind of taken off as one of the better players on the team. I said that when the question came up of who will be starting, I would be shocked if he benches Dillon Brooks. Even Dillon Brooks was having an average season. He loves having vets in the lineup. He values having vets. Dillon Brooks and Fred VanVleet were the first two free agents that he brought in, along with Rafael Stone, when Ime first came to Houston as the Rockets head coach. So he really values what Dillon brings on the defensive end. And then you factor in the fact that he's shooting the best percentage on the entire team from 3-point range. It really comes as no surprise that Dillon's going to stick in the starting lineup. And then Men and Dylan can kind of switch between who's playing small forward, who's playing power forward, because they're really kind of interchangeable position at this point. So it really comes as no surprise. And again, it also helps that Jabari himself say that he doesn't really care whether he's coming off the bench or whether he's starting. He just happy to be back on the court. Now, of course, at the end of the day, most NBA players have an ego, which is a good thing. That's why they got to the NBA, and they probably want to be starting. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to who's going to be finishing the game. And this is what Jabari said several days ago when I was out at practice. This is what he said about whether he cares about whether he starts or comes off the bench.
Nah, not really. I mean, you can start however you want. He's gonna play who he plays, and it's not really that big of a deal. Just looking to get back. I've been out for so long. I'm ready to play.
So, I mean, that's something that you definitely need on your team. You need unselfish players because, in a day, yeah, he has to do what the coaches tell him to do. But we've seen time and time again that doesn't mean that NBA players are going to like what a coach decides. It's not, and it doesn't mean that an NBA player is not going to let everybody know that he doesn't like what he see. The fact that Jabari may not be a star level player, and people go to the bench all the time, but he has been a starter since day one. He hasn't necessarily done anything to have himself being put on the bench other than get hurt. So he could have definitely had some some hurt feelings about coming off the bench. But he kind of saw the writing on the wall even when he came back, and just I'm sure he's watching Amen like everybody else and be like, okay, they're gonna have to make a decision, and there's a possibility that I'm going to the bench. So to hear him say that, he doesn't really care whether he come off the bench or whether he starts, that goes a long way in just his career and his maturity. And you never know, injuries happen, as we've seen with the Rockets happen all the time. He could be right back in the starting lineup, or maybe this lineup doesn't work out that well, and then Ime goes back. Ime has no problems shuffling in and out of players, depending on how they're playing. So it's not necessarily mean that Jabari is going to permanently be on the bench. And like I said, at the end of the day, this may be a better thing for him. He gets more shots with the second unit. He gets a lot more opportunities. He's going to get more looks because with the starters, he's like the third or fourth, sometimes fifth option on offense. And when he's coming off the bench, he's usually going to be the first or second option, and he's going to be able to get off more shots. So at the end of the day, that may actually help him as far as him being able to get off more shots with that second unit. So like I said, just kind of looking at the situation overall, the Rockets have won 2 in a row. They did have that 6-game losing streak that really more coincide with Fred going to the bench and not necessarily Jabari, because they were winning a good amount of games when Jabari first went out. Then it kind of flipped and went the other way once Fred got hurt, and they lost that 6 games in a row. But since that period, they kind of starting to turn it around. They're 5-2 in their last 7 games. The defense has definitely picked up, and like I said, having Jabari as an option as that stretch 5. Of course, you can do that if he was starting power forward, but it just seems like it's a more of a natural fit if you're doing it with him coming off the bench. And of course, also with Steven Adams not always being able to play back-to-backs, and also him still trying to get back from where he was with that injury he's had the last couple of seasons. So now you have that option of a guy who can play that 5, who can stretch out the floor, who can open up the lanes for everybody. Because remember that first game back, Jabari was on fire that first game. As soon as he came in the game off the bench, the Rockets offense took off. Players were able to get to the basket because it wasn't clogged. Because we know Alperen, plays a different type of game. He's usually going to be operating in the paint or on pick and roll. So that usually means you're going to have multiple defenders in the paint trying to clog up the lane and keep Alperen out of there. So now you have Jabari who can play that 5, and that's definitely going to make a big difference when it comes down to that. We'll see how it all plays out going forward, because the Rockets again play tomorrow versus Sacramento Kings. I'll be at that game. As usual, I appreciate the support. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and give a like to the video. And also, make sure you leave down in the comments, what do you think of the starting lineup? Do you think Jabari should have come off the bench? Or do you think somebody else like Dylan Brooks should have come off the bench? Definitely let me know down in the comments. Appreciate all the support. And make sure you check out the next episode of Rocket Fuel Podcast.